Hello, my name is Damaris Guerra. I will be giving a brief overview on Chapter 14, Counseling African Americans from the book Counseling the Culturally Diverse by Sue and Sue. We will first cover a brief background of the African American culture. In 2013, poverty was twice as high and unemployment was twice as high compared to white Americans. 23% have no high school diploma and 38% experience a downward mobility from the middle class. They not only encounter economic implications, but African Americans are expected to live 6 years shorter. Unfortunately, infant mortality is higher and 40% of those who survive will face incarceration. Despite the barriers African Americans encounter, they are growing in areas such as education, identity, and social class. Sue and Sue remind us that each individual client will be different and therefore should be assessed fair, disregarding the worldview generalizations. Sue and Sue describe the racial identity process that African Americans develop through. It is a sequential process in which identity ultimately transforms from non-Afrocentric to Afrocentric. Each stage affects the client's ability to disclose in areas such as racism and race. The first stage is the pre-encounter stage. They prefer a white counselor and will not report any racist encounters or experiences. That is perhaps because they hold the white culture at a high standard. The second stage is the encounter stage. The third stage is immersion. This stage reports to be the least satisfied with societal conditions. The final stage is internalization. This is the stage where the individual finds his or herself in a full Afrocentric identity. They prefer having a black counselor due to an increase of cultural mistrust. They report the highest self-esteem. It is important to remember that a counselor should remain culturally sensitive and always consider that race can run in correlation with client problems. 44% of African American families are led by married couples. That leaves more than half of households being held together by a single parent. 72% of women give birth outside of marriage. When in counseling, one should always remember that kinship bonds with extended families and friends might be present. That is, there might be non-traditional family arrangements. A person could be living with cousins, aunts, siblings, parents, and/or grandparents in the same household. Ask the client about their present home arrangements and who cohabits the household. Ask who runs what role within their home. It is important to remember that as a counselor, you are trying to increase and strengthen functionality and not change anything. Each situation should be addressed individually. There are culturally sensitive parent education programs that focus on different types of discipline, single parenting, and strategies for dealing with cultural conflicts and racism. Religion is a major aspect of the African American culture. 75% report that religion is important and show dependency to spiritual communities, especially when dealing with mental issues. When in practice, a counselor should consider the involvement of church leaders to help the client. Church leaders are usually deeply connected with the client and will be aware of ongoing problems in the client's life. African American parents that are aware of racism and environmental obstacles encourage children to set career and educational goals. A high number of African Americans aspire to the possibility of a higher education. Unfortunately, the environment at school is often negative. They are more likely to receive harsher punishment, and the education system blames the parents for it. They are criticized by personnel and assumed to be neglectful and unsupportive. Educators have to take cultural behaviors into consideration. Teachers describe African American students as aggressive and confrontational, but the students are not attempting to be disruptive. It is simply their cultural behavior. Students will learn best in an accepting and understanding environment. When counseling adolescent, problems experienced at home and at school should be discussed. Girls demonstrate a higher self-esteem and lower levels of substance abuse, but they not only face racism, but sexism as well. African American girls are the highest incarcerated trend. Crimes committed are usually nonviolent. These issues may cause low interest in counseling. Sue and Sue promote the technique of the use of African American experience to promote personal empowerment. African Americans, to unpopular belief, have many strengths that help them pull through all the negativity society assumes is part of their culture. There are signs of positive ethnic identity. There is pride in who they are. Different support systems, which they highly rely on, have been crucial to them. These include extended families, spiritual beliefs, accepting of multiple family roles. They hold a strong work and achievement ethic. Racism and discrimination is perhaps fought through on a day-to-day basis, but parents instill positive self-esteem in their children. African Americans face specific challenges. The most common is racism and discrimination. Sue and Sue mention that a resume or application with a black name will most likely receive a different response. It can be assumed that there will be a much more positive response to white names. Black Lives Matter is a movement that united to stand up for African Americans. This movement fights police brutality and African American deaths that have occurred in the hands of the law. Black Lives Matter believe that African Americans are intentionally left powerless at the hands of the state and are deprived of basic human rights. Many people associate people of color to crime. Racial profiling occurs commonly simply because of the color of skin. A young teen with a parent in jail is at risk of poverty, drug use, criminal activity, and quitting school. Some parents use racism and discrimination to innate a strong black identity in their children's lives, whereas others choose to ignore it and focus on strengthening other aspects and values of life. As a counselor, it is important to first identify your own racial attitudes and prepare for the possible mistrust and hostility from a client that could feel that they have already been labeled as a stereotype. African Americans have a substantial rate of therapy termination. This could be caused by the counselor's inability to create an alliance. Client's decision of continuing therapy is made by the immediate first personal evaluation they make of the counselor. The book explains steps that can help when counseling a person of a different culture. Ask the client if they are comfortable undergoing therapy with a counselor that is not of the same ethnic background as they are. Be open to topics like racism, prejudice, minority, and discrimination. Be aware of the client's thoughts about counseling and include them in the problem solution part of therapy. Remind the client of successful outcomes that people that are near and dear to them have accomplished. If you are faced with an uncooperative client, practice creating personal connections with them to create a sense of comfort. Always consider the client's environment. Evaluate the client's racial identity in terms of states or stages. If the client is in the pre-encounter stage, he will not pay importance to touchy subjects that could be crucial. If the client identifies himself as Afrocentric, a strong bond with racism and pride will exist. There are factors that might impose and hinder the growth and opportunities of African Americans, but the culture has evolutionized its self-perception and developed strengths that allow them to strive in a negative, stereotypical world. Thank you.